Hello everybody, thanks for joining us today for one of our Getting Started with TracerPlus and TracerPlus Desktop webinars. My name is Howie Heckman. I'm one of the developers here at PTS. I'll be walking you through kind of a live demonstration of how to get up and running with TracerPlus and deploying some real projects down to a connected mobile device to show you how to get started and how easy it is to learn and really get up and running with mobile applications. So I'll kind of be jumping into TracerPlus Desktop, showing you how you can download from our Solution Center, deploy a project almost immediately, and then kind of customize that as you may need it, just so you can see how you can get up and running with these mobile applications. I'll be using TracerPlus Desktop version 8, which is due out shortly. This is still a pre-release of the application, but I just want to show you how now you can, with version 8, deploy to both Windows-based devices as well as Android-based devices. So as usual, at the end of the webinar, if you guys have any questions as we're going through everything today, please feel free to type them in your question panel. I'll try to get to as many as possible. And if I don't get to your question, or if I happen to miss it, go ahead and shoot us an email. We'd be glad to get you the information that you need. Okay. Before I get started, I just want to mention that all of the applications that I use in the webinar today are available from our website. So you can see here, this is TracerPlus.com. If you want to download the applications and trial what I show you today, just jump over to TracerPlus.com, click up on the free trial section here, and you can go ahead and either download the pre-release of version 8 or the current version of 7.1 from our website. And they're all available as free trials, so you won't really have any limitations other than the amount of data that moves back and forth between the device and your PC. But otherwise, you can trial the applications, deploy them just as I'll show you today, and get up and running with TracerPlus. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump over to TracerPlus Desktop and kind of show you how you can get up and running designing these mobile applications. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the screen here. Actually, I have the project open here. But this is the home screen of TracerPlus Desktop, and this is what you'll be presented with after you install the application. All right, it's kind of the opening screen where you can start creating a new project or loading samples from our website. Let me go ahead and start up a new one here. Okay, so from the home screen, you can create a new project and start from scratch, or the usual place I'll recommend for people that are first learning TracerPlus is to jump into the sample section. And what this does, it'll actually go out to our website and goes to our online solution center, which is a library of pre-built applications. And they're all free to use, free to customize, and you can download them directly into TracerPlus Desktop and deploy them to a connected device. So that's where I thought I'd start today and kind of show you how that process works. So to do that, you just kind of click on the Samples button. You'll be presented with a little import screen of pre-built applications, and they're sorted by category. So you can see you have different categories here for like asset tracking, inventory control, and so on, inspections, and different things here. And you can kind of just search around for what you're looking for the mobile device. Let's say if you jumped into asset tracking, you can go ahead and maybe here's an RFID application pre-built for scanning RFID tags and looking up asset information for different IT equipment. But there's a bunch of different applications you can kind of scroll through here and take a look. And all of them, if you want to download and open in TracerPlus Desktop, you would just go ahead and hit Select and then hit the Next button down here, and you can download that. I'm going to actually go ahead into the Event Management section and take a look at this Corporate Event Tracking application. So again, you can see here there's a number of different event tracking applications for event attendance, like doing ticket scanning. This corporate event tracking allows you to track people that show up at events and things like that. So if I go ahead and just hit Select on this, you can see a screenshot of the application. This is what it'll look like when you deploy it to the mobile device, but it's fully configured and ready to deploy. So all you have to do is hit Next if this is the one you'd like, and then hit the Import button, and finally Finish. Okay, when that downloads, it'll open up automatically inside of TracerPlus Desktop, and on the left-hand side, you'll see the tree of forms that are already built for this application. So you can see there's an event tracker form and there's an employee list form. And at this point, you really could, if you want, just go ahead and deploy it to the device. So I do have a connected device to my PC here, and I'm sharing the screen of that connected device, which is showing TracerPlus. And right here, you can see I have 3 default forms in TracerPlus. And now I'm going to go ahead and deploy a new one from TracerPlus Desktop. Okay, so in TracerPlus Desktop, I can take a look at these. If I wanted to jump to the form designer just to show you, it looks like what you saw from the website or the downloading from our Solution Center. It's a pre-built form for selecting an event type and scanning employees that show up at this event. So you can see it's already built. And if you wanted to move the controls around on the form, you can do that here. So you can see I can grab this. If I wanted to, I could add a company logo or something like that using this control bar on the left. And you can really start to customize what the form looks like. But just to show you how easy it is to actually get this on the device and get up and running, I'm going to go ahead and just deploy it. So down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen here, I'll just go ahead and click the Build Deploy button. Okay, this will bring up the Build Deploy form. And now for version 8, this is a little bit different than version 7. Version 7, you would just go ahead and hit deploy, and it would deploy to a Windows Mobile or Windows CE-based device. For version 8, you have a platform option. And you can deploy to either a Windows Mobile or an Android device. So if you connected, say, an Android phone or something like that, the only change you would need to do to deploy to that device is switch the platform to Android and then go ahead and hit the deploy button. And that'll take the same project that maybe was pre-built for a Windows Mobile device and deploy it to Android. So you can kind of build these applications and deploy them to either platform simply by changing the selected platform when you deploy it. Okay, so for the demonstration today, I'm going to leave it on Windows Mobile. I'm going to go ahead and just hit the deploy button. And what you'll see is on the connected device, it'll actually close TracerPlus, deploy the application, and when the deployment's complete, it'll open up the application on the handheld, and it's built to what you have defined in TracerPlus Desktop here. So you can see I have this event tracker form, which is set up for the event tracking application. If I go ahead and open that, you'll see now it's pre-configured for scanning these tickets or these employees as they show up at the event. So it's a fully configured application. It's already set and ready to go. You can see it has a drop-down here for the event type. You can go ahead and scan employee IDs. Now, one thing I want to change here is I did preload this device with data. So if I go ahead and, let's say, pick a meeting, enter an event ID. Down here, I can go ahead and scan the employees. So let's just say I happen to scan an employee. Now, this one's preloaded with data, so it's going to go ahead and scan and submit that data. One thing you can change here is if you wanted to see the data that's on the device. Since I am auto-submitting it, I'm going to go ahead and make a slight change to my application. So on the employee ID field, I'm going to go ahead and turn off this auto-submit so that you can see it look up the employee and not automatically save that record to the device. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this again. Hit the deploy button. It's going to go ahead and close the application, deploy my new change that I just made. Now if I open up this application and I scan an employee, you can see it looks up the employee information and displays on the screen. Now, just to mention the change that I made there, I turned off the auto-submit on this field. And what auto-submit does is when you scan a barcode or if you key in information and hit enter, it's going to automatically save the data that you have filled out on this form. So the user doesn't really have to do anything. They're just scanning a barcode and it saves that information. So I just turned that off for the employee ID field so you could see the employee name come up here and submit to the database. Okay, so that's kind of a fully configured application that's just available from our website. Again, you can configure it and you can change things as you need them. And I'm going to go ahead and back now and actually make some changes to this application so you can see how easy it is to modify a pre-built project and make it kind of customized to what you need. Okay, so I'll go ahead and back over to TracerPlus Desktop and do that. Okay, so my project now is made up of these two applications. Right now it has the event tracker form and the employee list. The employee list is where the data is being saved, so all those employee names, so that's where that Axl Rose name was loaded, so that was preloaded into this form. The event tracker form is the form that you're actually scanning and that you're using on the handheld like you saw on the device here. So you can see it has this event tracker form. So that's the one the mobile workers out in the field scanning these attendee IDs and using to collect data. The other one is disabled and just simply loaded with information so that it can look up that information when you scan the employee. So it'll display his name when you scan the badge. Okay. But for each TracerPlus Desktop project, you can have up to 32 of these forms. So in this one, there's only 2. They're actually called sessions, but there's 2 sessions in this application. If we wanted to go ahead and add a new session to this, we would just simply hit this plus button up at the top. And what that does is it adds a new form to our project and adds it in kind of a default state. So you can see here it's called Session 3, and by default it'll add 10 fields of information to your project and ready to be configured. If you wanted to simply use this default project, what you could do is go ahead and jump over to the Form Designer and hit the Create Default, and you can see it'll build the form that the mobile worker will be using based on the field settings that you have configured here. And since these field settings are all just fields 1 through 10, the Form Designer is built based off of fields 1 through 10. So if I were to deploy this to the device, you would see a new session on the handheld called Session 3 with these 10 fields of information. So I'll go ahead and do that really quickly just so you can see as I add these forms to the application, they'll get deployed with the project, and now the handheld will contain new forms for the mobile worker to use. So now you can see I have Event Tracker and Session 3, and if I open up Session 3, I have a new form on the device, which doesn't do very much. It's just set in this default state. But you can see you can quickly deploy a new form to the device. Okay, so typically what you do, let me exit out of here. So typically what you do for these sessions, you take maybe a paper form or something like that you have pre-configured, or some project that you want to turn into one of these electronic forms, and jump into the field settings to get started. Now the field settings are where you're adding all of the fields of information that you'd like to collect. So by default it has fields 1 through 10, but let's say I wanted to do, say, like a fire extinguisher inspection. Well, what I can do is go ahead and start naming these fields of information. Let's say extinguisher ID, maybe something like location, pressure. So typically this may be some type of paper form that you already have set up for these extinguisher inspections. But now you're actually just going through and building it in an electronic version for TracerPlus. So I'm going to go ahead and add extinguisher ID, location, pressure. Let's do maybe a pass-fail and a date timestamp of the inspection. Okay, so you're really just adding all of the fields of information you'd like to collect, removing any ones or adding additional ones as needed. So I'm just going to use these 5 fields here. Once you add the fields here, you'll want to configure the attributes of those fields. So an extinguisher ID, that's generally going to be like a barcode scan. So if you wanted to scan that extinguisher, you could just leave it as a text field so you can scan into that field. So generally this one's going to be kind of in the default state. But you could change that if you wanted to. So maybe if you only had a limited number of extinguishers, you could go ahead and maybe change it to a drop-down, and this would allow you to select that particular extinguisher from the drop-down rather than having to scan that barcode. For the demo here, I'm going to leave it as text. For location, maybe I'll go ahead and change this one to a drop-down and add a couple of locations. So let's say this is room 101. Room 1001, 2002, and so on. So you can add a couple different bits of information to the drop-down, and these are the items that will be displayed in the location drop-down when I deploy this to TracerPlus. For the pressure, maybe I want to make sure that this is a number, a data type of number. This is something that we'll want to key in as a numeric value, so I'll just leave the rest as is. For pass-fail, maybe we'll want to make this one a checkbox so that the user, based on maybe a pressure reading, can just check this off as pass-fail so that later on when you're looking at this data, you can see if this extinguisher is any good. For the date-time field, I'll go ahead and change the data type of this one to date-time. If you needed to change the format of that, you could as well. If you just wanted the date or just the time or so on, you can do that. But you're really just going through and changing these types of fields. For the date time, maybe I'll make this one a read-only. The pass-fail, I have a checkbox. Just to mention maybe some of the other field types you have available here. So I talked about the text that allows you to just type in data into the field. You can change fields to the drop-down, so you can select items from a drop-down. You have the checkbox field. There's a variable field type, and this allows you to capture data or set up a field like an auto number field, so similar to a database, how it's always incrementing the values by 1. You can also capture things like user IDs. So TracerPlus supports user logins. So a user has to log into the mobile application before they can begin using these mobile forms. One of the variable field types here, which I'll jump over to, is a user. So you can capture the user that's logged in with the form data so that you know who filled out that form and submitted that data. You can also do signature capture. So if you wanted to add a signature pad to the form, you can go ahead and change the field type to signature. The calculated field allows you to do different mathematical operations on a field. So you can do like barcode parsing. You can do GPS coordinates, so you can capture GPS coordinates with your form. The most powerful one, I think, in the calculated field option is the barcode parsing, and that allows you to pull out bits of information from another field and populate it into the current calculated field. So if you were to scan something like the back of a driver's license, you could configure it so that you can pull out the first name or pull out the last name and only have that value in the field. The last one here is an image field type, and if you set an image field type on the form, that'll put a button on your form so you can take a picture, and as long as the device has a camera, you can go ahead and take a picture with your form and submit that data to save it. So in the case of an extinguisher ID, maybe you could do something like a damage field. Somehow the extinguisher was damaged and you wanted to take a picture of it. You could add an image field to your form and take a picture with that data. Okay, but I'm going to leave the pass-fail as a checkbox. And I think that's all I want to do for the field types on our form. Just to touch on some of these other options you have here. In the after scan settings, you can control the flow of how you're entering data on the form. So this go-to field here, this controls where the cursor jumps to next after you enter data into a particular field. So let's say, for instance, on the pass-fail, you don't really want the pass-fail option to go into the date time. You'll probably want that one to go back to the extinguisher ID. This way, when you enter data into the pass-fail checkbox, probably usually be a drop-down or something like that, but it would jump the cursor back up to the extinguisher ID so that you can then go ahead and begin scanning the next extinguisher. And it kind of limits the amount of screen touch that a user has to do on the form as they're using the application. So it's really how you control the flow. One thing I mentioned before, the auto submit, that option allows you to automatically save the record when something has been entered into one of these fields. So usually that's going to be the last field of information that you enter on your form. And once you enter that data, it'll go ahead and auto submit that record so that you don't have to even hit a submit or save button on the form. It's just saving that data as a record to your database. In the validation area here, you can set up different validation settings for each one of the fields. So on an old-fashioned paper form, you couldn't validate that data. That data gets validated once it gets back to the office. With the electronic version of TracerPlus here, you can validate the field at the time of entering the data. So here in the validation tab is where you can kind of configure all of that. You can force user input. So the extinguisher ID you never want to submit as a blank value. So maybe you want to enter a min length of 1. That makes sure that before the user submits and saves this extinguisher inspection, it's going to make sure there's data in that field. In this case, it would just make sure that it's 1 character, but you can add additional validation here to verify that input on that field. You can do things like a barcode type. Maybe all of your extinguisher barcodes are code 39. You can go ahead and enter that here. You can force the validation of that barcode type so that the user can't submit this record until this validation passes. So you know they can't key in an extinguisher ID. They'll have to scan it. But there's a lot of other validation. You can do custom validation sounds. So you can do like the Bart Simpson Doe sound when there's some kind of validation fails, or some of the guys here like to do the Pac-Man dying sound. But as you fill out this form, you can get some feedback as to what went wrong as you're filling out the form with different validation messages and sounds and things like that. This last tab here is one of the most powerful features of TracerPlus. It's called lookups. Lookups allow you to, just like in the event tracker session, look into another session to pull up information. And in the case of the event tracker, it was looking up the employee name based on the employee ID. So you can see here the lookup options for the name are filled out. It's matching an employee ID so that it can display the name automatically. And that makes it so the user, when they scan that employee badge, they don't have to key in their name. The handheld is going to do that for them. It's going to look up that employee name and display it to them on the form. For the extinguisher ID, you could probably do something like a location. You might want to turn on lookups here. So if you already had all of the extinguishers in like an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database or SQL Server database or something like that, you can look up that information from the database and have it displayed here. So the user's really not keying in the information for it. They can see it when they scan it. So that's useful for something maybe like a physical inventory. If you're setting up a physical inventory form and you want to scan an item and you want to display the description of what that item is, you would configure the description field to be a lookup. And in this way, the data is displayed to the user after they scan it, and they can verify that they scanned the correct thing. It's also another way of doing validation. Maybe you scan an item, and you want to just make sure that it is or not based on whether or not the lookup succeeds. So it's got a couple of useful features, but it really is powerful in that it can fill out a form based on one piece of information. So you just scan a barcode or you scan an RFID tag, and it'll display that information through the lookup and display it to the end user. Okay, I'm not going to go ahead and configure that for now. In this case, this one's a drop-down, so you saw that I added a couple drop-down items to this form. One thing I want to do for my session name is call it the extinguisher inspection form. So I want this to be displayed on the main screen of TracerPlus. So I don't have it open yet, but it'll open when I deploy it. So the user knows that this is the extinguisher inspection form. Just to touch on a couple of the other options here, you have TracerPlus supports barcode scanning in any of the fields. We also have pretty powerful RFID support. So RFID, you can, if you wanted it in an application, you can just turn it on here in this RFID enable checkbox. And the RFID obviously allows you to scan multiple items in a row, so you can pull a trigger and read an entire room of inventory in just a couple of minutes. You can just turn that on here through the Enable RFID scanner. There's also settings for importing and exporting data from each one of your sessions. So if you wanted to, you can simply export text files or XML files based on these settings here from each one of your forms, and then use that information to import into some pre-existing system if you wanted to just use the handheld export feature. I won't get into it today, but we do have a synchronization tool called TracerPlus Connect, which kind of bypasses these import-export settings and directly connects your mobile forms to those pre-existing database tables or Excel spreadsheet or something like that. And it really just allows you to marry up these forms to, say, a database table through an ODBC driver or an Excel spreadsheet or even just a text file. And you can configure that to sync either through the Cradle or through a Wi-Fi sync, or in version 8.0, you can do a real-time connection. So when you scan an employee in your event tracker form, it will look up that information directly from that Excel spreadsheet or ODBC database and display that information to the end user. So that's TracerPlus Connect. But if you wanted to import or export data on the handheld in a kind of a more manual way, you can configure import-export settings here using this import-export option. Printing and messaging are similar. You can set up custom reports for each one of your sessions, and you can do Bluetooth or a wireless LAN printing, or even RS2 or serial port RS-232 printing from your forms. So you can start scanning information, print labels or receipts. The messaging is similar. You can custom design message reports, and you can email the data that you've collected using the TracerPlus forms. So for that, you would turn on this messaging feature. The reason it's called messaging as opposed to email is because you can email, and you can also do text messaging. So if you wanted to, say at the end of an extinguisher inspection, you wanted to text message some value to someone saying, hey, the inspection has been complete, you can do that as well. So that's done through the messaging section here. For both of them, you can configure custom reports, which is basically the look and feel of either the email or the printout that gets sent to the printer or the email, and you can configure them here. So you can change how those look. And those are really built based on the data that you collect in TracerPlus, so you can print and email that data. Okay, so that's kind of all the features here for the session settings. The last thing you'd want to do after you kind of add all of the fields of information, configure validation, and so on, you just want to jump over to the form designer. And the first thing it usually asks when you go to the form designer is, like, is whether or not you want to build the default form. And I'm going to reset it here to the default form. But what that does is it will take the settings, again, that you've configured in the field settings and build the form based on them. So you can see here, I built the form with my 5 fields for extinguisher ID, location, pressure, the pass-fail checkbox, and the date timestamp. So I built all of those forms, or all of those fields. At this point, if you wanted to kind of change the layout and things like that, you can do that. You can move things around. You could change the colors of everything. So if I wanted to maybe change the background color of my form, I can do that. If you wanted to add a company logo, you could. But you have complete control over what this looks like. You could add different buttons on the form to do different things. So let's say you wanted to print this extinguisher, or maybe you wanted to print a label for the extinguisher when you're done. So you print a inspection complete on some date. You can print a label on the form. So what you would do is add a button to the form, go ahead and say print label for the caption. Go ahead and change the button action. There's a bunch of different button actions that are available. So if you wanted to do a print from your form, you just change the button action to print. And now based on the print settings you have there, you can print the label for your inspection and then slap it on the extinguisher as you complete the inspection. Okay. Some of the other button actions here, you have different things for launching an external application. You could load like Google Maps. So some people have set up things where they capture the GPS coordinates in TracerPlus, and then they can load Google Maps. You can export your data. You can send an email from here. There's a number of different things you can do for TracerPlus. You can do DB navigation, so you can flip between records on your form. Okay, but let's just say I have that complete. Let me delete this print button. Once you have the design complete, as usual, all you do is go up to the Tools, Build, Deploy button. And any change that you make, you go ahead and deploy it down to the handheld. So here I'm going to go ahead and deploy it to my device again. When the deployment is complete, it opens TracerPlus on the connected device automatically. And you can see now I have my new extinguisher inspection form available on the mobile device. So again, you can have up to 32 of these forms, and they can be completely different applications. I have 2 now for event tracking and extinguisher inspection. If I open up the extinguisher inspection form, you can see it looks like what I designed in the application here. It's got my pass-fail checkbox. When I did you can see that when I did the pass-fail checkbox, it tried to submit this record as an extinguisher inspection, but since I didn't enter an extinguisher ID, it shows the error message saying, please enter an extinguisher ID. So if I were to enter an extinguisher ID there, now this could be a barcode scan or RFID scan, now it would allow me to submit this by clicking that checkbox. But I'll go ahead and finish I don't know what, now if I click this, it's going to automatically save the record, and you can see it also put the cursor back up in the extinguisher ID because I changed the flow of how I was entering data. So by checking this box, it would jump the cursor back up to the extinguisher ID ready for the next inspection. But that's kind of all the control you have in TracerPlus in how the flow of the form works, how you design the forms, how you can add company logos and things like that. This one's pretty ugly here, but you can really take some time in lining the controls up, changing the colors, the fonts, and everything on this form. You have control with the color of these buttons, the buttons that you have available to the user. You can kind of control all of that stuff within TracerPlus here. Okay. And just to mention one more moment, because I wasn't going to get into it today, but usually a lot of people have questions about getting the data back now to a back-end database or an Excel spreadsheet. Now, right now, I just set up the mobile forms. At this point, if you're getting pretty familiar with TracerPlus, that's usually when I recommend taking a look at TracerPlus Connect and how to move that data back and forth to these mobile forms and your pre-existing database or Excel spreadsheet or whatever you may be using on the back end. Once you have everything configured here, you would jump over to TracerPlus Connect, and the way TracerPlus connects is you're marrying the forms that you have created for your mobile device to a database table. So for this extinguisher inspection, what you would do is you would, in TracerPlus Connect, select that as the source of your data. This is where the mobile worker is creating these inspections. Then you pick the destination of your data, and the destination can be a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, a Microsoft Access database, SQL Server database, or anything that has an ODBC driver available. And then marry up the fields of information that you have in this extinguisher inspection form to the fields that you have in your Excel spreadsheet or database table or text file. So that every time you do a sync, it's going to send the data that was collected from this form to that back-end database table. Because this is configured as the source, and the destination will be set as the that destination that you selected, which would be the Excel spreadsheet. And to show you really quickly how that's done, I'll open up TracerPlus Connect. Okay, and this is the home screen of TracerPlus Connect. And what you would do here is, let's say I wanted to download my, let's call this download extinguisher inspections. Okay, on the source side, you're going to pick TracerPlus. Now, the source could be ODBC because you want to send data to the handheld. It could be Excel because you want to send data to the handheld. But if you want to download data from the handheld, you would select on the source side TracerPlus. And then on the destination side, you're picking where that data goes. So if you wanted to go to an Access database, Oracle database, or anything like that, you would select ODBC. When you pick ODBC, you would then select the database you'd like to send the data to and the table you'd like to send the data to. So you're sending that information to this database every time the data is synchronized. So that's kind of how TracerPlus Connect works. You're picking a source of your data and a destination of your data. If you wanted to go in the reverse and upload information to the handheld, you would select something like, maybe if you had an Excel spreadsheet that you wanted to that had the, say, your employee list for the employee inspection, you would select the Excel spreadsheet that contains that information on the source side. And then on the destination side, you're selecting TracerPlus. So in that case, any of that information that's in the Excel worksheet that you have selected will get sent to the destination, which will be your TracerPlus session. And that's how you would populate that employee list every time you do a sync, and you can do, again, Wi-Fi sync or something like that, through TracerPlus Connect. If you didn't use TracerPlus Connect, again, you'd be using the import-export of the text files.